I'm Richard Pyatt. Welcome back to Pest PROspectives. It's the Pest Pros of Michigan here, emphasis on pros, because we bring them in and ask them about the pesky bugs you deal with, maybe rodents, other things. Boy, I tell you what, when these associate certified entomologists like Amber Byars go to parties, they probably get asked all kinds of questions when they tell people what they do. Is that true, Amber?
Oh, it's true. Yeah, we become, the expert on all the fun bug stuff. So you spend a lot of time going through, why do I have these? What can I do about it?
Yes, this is what happens when an expert shows up and people are excited and they say, oh my gosh. And I will wager that what we'll talk about today are some of the things they ask about. That is to say, nuisance bugs, not the least of which are stink bugs and boxelders and other things. But these are the things that generally don't cause trouble, but they're kind of a pain and they're around. And if we stick with stink bugs for just a second, I can remember my family down in the middle section of the South and the far South complaining for years about stink bugs. And we would say, oh, we don't have those in Michigan. Guess what? We do now. And I'm probably not telling anybody anything about that. They're pretty prominent, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And the most annoying factor is that they love to invade structures. So they primarily, and this goes for most nuisance pests, they primarily live outdoors. And that's where they're going to be most active, except for certain times of the year. Stink bugs specifically, they will invade structures when the temperatures cool down. So, and that's not, randomly, it's biologically. They do that for a reason. So yeah, that's why people get so frustrated with stink bugs is, once the fall comes, they start finding them in the house. And that's when we get the phone calls.
Yeah, you do. Now, we're going to get back to them in just a second. But besides stink bugs and boxelders, what else is considered a nuisance bug?
Yeah, so some other examples would be Asian lady beetles. They kind of fall into the same category as boxelders and stink bugs as far as occasional invaders and overwintering pests go. Otherwise, you have pests that typically will be outdoors but will wander inside for certain reasons to avoid harsh weather, to just wandering, just like end up there by accident, or, certain conditions in the home are favorable to them. So we have things like crickets who love to be in moist areas. We have springtails, occasional invaders. They will move into the structure if there is certain vegetation outside of the home and then favorable conditions inside, they will wander in and move in. And then we have earwigs. I know everybody knows what an earwig is. They're the ones with the little pinchers,
Yes.
And they're incredibly frustrating when they get in, and kind of weird and scary looking to some people,
Right. And they look like they might bite you with those pinchers, but they don't do that, right?
No, yeah, none of these pests necessarily cause anything. They're not critical, which we classify as something that could cause damage, disease, or discomfort. And I guess, define discomfort, but...
Yeah. All right. And are the Asian lady beetles the ones that look like ladybugs?
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, I see a few of those.
They look like ladybugs. There's some characteristic differences in the Asian lady beetle.
I see.
They can have a numerous variety of different amount of spots on their wing pads, and they can be different colors. They can range from like a really light yellow through orange to a bright red. And ladybugs are always going to be that nice, beautiful red color.
I see. That makes sense. The tint of that color is a little bit different. And they are certainly around too. You talked about pill bugs, or at least we referred to it initially. Those are what we sometimes call roly-poly bugs. I think my fourth grade teacher called them that. Yes.
Yeah, they're considered a crustacean. Their biology, they're very, very interesting pests. But they will also wander in the home or come through cracks and crevices inside. And again, they won't cause any damage or anything, but they're just annoying. They'll be in the basements around the exterior walls and caught in spider webs and stuff. They might make their way up into the main levels, but they're not going to do anything. They just, they're a nuisance.
Yes. So I can speak to that. I've had pill bugs around think I've eliminated that problem now. You guys actually told me there's some moisture somewhere and they like that. Same kind of thing
Yeah.
with crickets. I've had those too. And we discovered the source of that and eliminated it, so they've gone away. But I want to come back to the stink bug thing because it is so prevalent. The stink bugs, I've had people say, yeah, they really stink when you smash them. I don't smell it. Do they have a stink?
And they absolutely do. They don't smell great. So all throughout the entire summer season, they're feeding, they're plant feeders, so they're sucking the juices out of plants. And after they're doing that for an entire season, they're going to be most pungent in the fall, which is when they smell pretty bad. Like if somebody goes to, manipulate them, grab them physically, they will stink pretty bad. That smell, weirdly enough, over their diapause in the winter will go away as they have not fed throughout a whole season. So in the spring, they might not smell as bad, but they absolutely do stink. That is why one of the main reasons we will not recommend clients to necessarily use like a zapper. Like, outside you can hang up those lights that have the zap to them.
Yeah.
We do not recommend those for stink bugs because they will release that defense smell and it will just be no good. Even, sometimes vacuums that don't have a great filtration or a HEPA filter in them aren't very great either because they will stink. And then, when you vacuum something smelly, it kind of, just goes everywhere and then your vacuum stinks for a long time. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think you described why I haven't smelled it because I don't get down and handle them. So
Right.
maybe that's
there
why.
you go.
So what is the approach when somebody calls you and says, I'm loaded with stink bugs? How do you handle it?
Well, great question. So the biggest thing that I find effective with clients is to really set expectations and educate them well up front. First, that's the most important thing that you can do initially is just explain without, boring people or going too crazy with it. Explain biology and behavior of the pest to the client so that they can have a reasonable expectation of what the service can provide. Okay. Because people have this weird illusion that, we'll come in with a pesticide and we'll treat and poof, all the bugs will be gone, which if you don't explain up front that that's not the case, is a valid thing to think, right? But the truth is pesticides can only do so much. So if you can explain to your client in a reasonable way that pesticides are one piece of the puzzle and we can start controlling populations with a barrier around the structure, it will reduce the amount of activity that they have, but it won't do two things. It will not eliminate them and it will not keep them out of the house. That's two very, very important things for them to know because, I've learned this from failing in the past that, we'll get calls and clients will say, I'm getting stink bugs in my house still. Your service is failing. That's not true. What really needs to happen is conducive conditions outside would either need to be eliminated, which are removing all the trees and the plant sources, which is usually impossible.
Yeah.
Or two, if they don't want to see a stink bug in the house, then they need to seal off any entry point or gap around the structure that the stink bugs could be getting in. So that's kind of how we try to explain these services to clients. We'll, try to set their expectations up front as clearly as we can.
So there's a good chance that we'll still see a few around at least, even with some of the more common approaches to dealing with it. You're not going to level your whole yard of vegetation just to get rid of stink bugs. Yeah.
Right. And, most of the time, the thing that clients are worried about is usually like just reducing the amount of activity that they're having in the house. And by the time a client's calling in the fall or even the spring, the problem has been manifesting itself for a period of time prior to us getting on the property, right? So that's another important factor to try to explain to people is if we're coming midwinter for stink bugs being in the home, we're about 6 months past when we should have been on the property, we should have been on the property starting either springtime when everything is starting to wake up and move around, or at least by the middle of the summer, to try to get some preventative barriers down.
That makes sense. So I presumed that when it got cold, those stink bugs were dead and gone. I think you've inferred that that may not be the case.
Exactly. Yeah, no, you're right. So we call it, science calls it diapause. It's the same as a mammal going into hibernation.
I see.
The insect kind of goes into a very deep sleep-like state over the winter when the temperatures drop. They just can't function, So that is their biological reason for moving into structures to try to stay at a reasonable temperature long enough to go into diapause and survive the winter.
Yeah.
So they're not inactive. They're still alive. They're just, in a diapause state. They're just tucked away, out of sight, usually in the wall void and attic space under the insulation. And so when we think about that in relativity to where we need to treat and when, it's very important to focus on areas that they're going to use to enter the home, which is, again, why exclusion efforts are important, because some areas that they're using to gain entry, we can't treat, like roof level peaks, ridge vent to be specific. Our power sprayers are not reaching those areas. It would pose best interest to put a guard over the ridge vent to keep them out of the roof level.
Wow.
We can also do something that's called attic dusting. Once they've already made it in, you can go in and do a light dusting in the attic around the sill plate areas and the insulation to kind of control what's already made it in. But that's it's a high level service, usually tied to a higher dollar amount. And, that's the position clients get into with themselves is, do I want to invest that much into this for stink bugs?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that makes sense. I can relay my experience, which is in the spring, they come out, and then when it gets hot, they disappear.
Right.
And then in the fall, when it cools down, they're back again in some sort of hurrah. I don't get them in the house, but they're outside. So at least I say I don't get them in the house. Like you say, maybe they're in the attic. Maybe they're somewhere else under the siding.
Out of rain. Yeah.
Yes. Right. So you described the approach here with stink bugs, but is this a common approach with a number of these nuisance bugs we've talked about?
It can relate to a lot of this. Again, it's how extreme do clients want to take it? It's definitely up to them. But that's why setting the expectation up is so important, because pesticides are the number one way for clients to maintain populations as far as efficiency and financially. It is definitely the way to go for maintenance. You come out and you apply an appropriately labeled pesticide to appropriate areas, and that does keep populations of insects down. It does. It's the truth. It will not, however, like I said earlier, eliminate or keep them out of the house. So you can absolutely look for exclusion efforts to try to control all sorts of pests, but maintenance services with pesticides are key. They have a part in this cycle, and as long as we're doing them on a regular basis, it should definitely knock down that population to a reasonable amount for the client.
Yeah, I was just going to say we can have our expectations adjusted and maybe not work so hard with these solutions that then just reduce the population, but a few of them will still be around.
Yeah, and it definitely depends too on the environment. I live in an urban suburban area. There's not a lot of vegetation around me. I mean, it's Michigan, so we're surrounded by forests, but there's not a ton in my direct property. So I don't have a lot of pressure on my house. But then, I drive 10 minutes south of here, and I have a wooded lot that has tons of pressure on it. And so that service might look a little bit different than mine. I might need a little bit more, I might need more frequent services on that property than I do at my house. I might need to talk to them about vegetation maintenance and getting trees cut away. I might need to talk to them about having systemic pesticide applications done to their vegetation, something that they might want to consider. But environmental factors are definitely huge in trying to figure out what's going to work best for the client as well.
Yeah, and so the point is made. Each piece of property that you're working with has to be evaluated for its own environmental factors and probably
exactly.
others. So that's important. You talked about trees. That's the whole boxelder thing, right? They like
That
trees,
as well,
don't
yep.
they? Yeah,
They
these
do.
are these narrow bugs that are kind of long, and they have what looks like a shield, an orange kind of marking on their back.
Yep.
I see a lot of those too, and they're attracted to certain vegetation also.
Yeah, specifically, right? Boxelder trees. They
Yeah.
love maple. So yeah, that it poses a challenge when you're on a property with, such luscious vegetation around, specifically those trees that people are not going to get rid of. I have had a couple of clients go to that extreme to chop down their trees. I literally have. It was like, wow, they really weren't messing around with these boxelder bugs. They chopped down some trees, and it did really lower their population. But that's few and far where you're finding clients that go to that level.
Yes, well, that's true. You really hate to rearrange your whole environment that you love so much just for these nuisances.
Yeah.
Nevertheless,
exactly.
I'm sure you see the other side of it where you meet folks who say, I don't want to see a bug in the house anywhere. And so you've got to deal with that.
Right. Exactly.
Well, these are the questions and discussions that happen from the Pest Pros of Michigan and what we bring you here on Pest Prospectives. Amber Byars, of course, understands the nature of this as an associate certified entomologist. ACE, as we call it. She also oversees field operations. You hear that knowledge come through in these conversations too, and those which you have with them. The information is in the show notes. Just click through if you have a question you want to ask the Pest Pros of Michigan, and we invite you to subscribe to this podcast where you get them. Amber, thank you. Till next time. See you later.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, see ya.